Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. In our show today, we're going to take a look at the impact of AI on analyst relations. And this is a topic that, while I deal with it every day, I haven't actually done on the podcast. So I'm excited about it. And I'm joined by one of my old analyst relations friends, Michael Ellis. So, Michael, welcome.
Hi, Michael. It's great to be on your podcast today. Thanks so much for having me.
Maybe we should have numbered each other, Michael 1 and Michael 2.
That's true.
No. Anyway, so why don't we just jump right in? You want to give us an introduction and, tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
Sure. So I started way back actually on the investor side, analyzing software companies to really spot those that were poised to benefit from emerging trends, companies with both the vision and execution to match. That eventually led me to the analyst relations team at Salesforce, which was and still is one of the best in the business.
Yeah.
They're led by John Tashik and Ann Chen. The team really taught me to approach AR as a strategic lever in addition to the tactical execution. And in the last 10 plus years, I've built and led AR programs at Dropbox, Unity, and most recently Braze, all at different growth stages with different stakeholder needs. But the common thread has always been, sort of impact using, AR to shape perception at both the market and the company level, really looking to accelerate market traction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I love working with the Salesforce team. So, you're right. It's definitely one of the premier programs, and where we met, obviously.
Yeah.
For listeners that aren't familiar with this, though, because we use the term analyst relations. I know what we mean because I talk to analyst relations people every day, but maybe some of the listeners don't really have a good context for the discussion. So can you just tell us a little bit more about what AR does, what AR professionals do, and how it benefits companies?
Sure. So AR, as opposed to IR or PR, is about earning influence and really driving engagement with the analysts who shape enterprise buying decisions. And we're talking about industry analysts here as distinct from financial analysts with firms like
Right.
Gartner, Forrester, IDC, and many smaller boutique firms. These analysts are really trusted advisors to the C-suite and deal influencers. And what AR does is really try to blend that strategic insight with sort of tactical precision to shape how analysts perceive a company's vision, product strength, and fit with the market. And the goal is, again, to really accelerate enterprise momentum by increasing visibility, credibility, and relevance in buying conversations. I would say one thing that comes up often in talking about analyst relations is this myth that AR is pay to play. And yes, analyst firms are businesses, and many vendors subscribe to their research, but those subscriptions don't necessarily buy you positive coverage or inclusion in the Magic Quadrant or get you into the part of the quadrant that you want to be. Really earn that by showing up with vision, customer value, and a strong POV on where the market is heading and how your company is contributing to that. And I've been at firms with really modest AR budgets, that had influential and impactful AR programs. And if I'm talking to, maybe a lot to your audience, so like a startup founder, I tell them this, that AR really accelerates sort of your credibility with enterprise decision makers. So, analysts can open doors. They're often brought in to advise on purchasing decisions. They can help you pressure test your positioning in part of the two-way nature of these conversations. And they really keep you top of mind in those buying conversations. And yeah, just to put a fine point on this, it's unlike PR, it's not just outbound. It's really a two-way channel of high value feedback that can really help sharpen your product and your strategy.
Yeah, that's we get the as analysts, we get the pay to play label a lot too, and it's a fine line. But I feel like if you and for my firm and for what I do, if you're careful enough to make sure you know where the boundaries are, you can make this so that I can produce some interesting, useful market research for you to use. But at the same time, I'm not simply parroting the messages that you give or that your folks want necessarily, because I have my opinion and view of the marketplace. So it's always one that comes up a lot, I know, and I push back on it really hard too. I think that there's a lot of value, and I'm always really, as an analyst, that two-way street makes a big difference to me, right? I don't want to just come and have you read off of slides to me once a month. I want to have a conversation, right? And I think that's actually one of the things that I love about working with the analyst relations team is getting that conversation going and having that as a two-way street. So
Yeah, those conversations are, one of the fun aspects that I really enjoy about the job.
yeah. Um, so I'm curious now. Obviously, we're AI is having an impact on everything, right? I mean, certainly in my business, I'm using it, and I know that analyst relations teams are starting to incorporate it in different parts of the day to day work. So, what are you seeing? How are AR teams using tools now for research, outreach, strategy, et cetera?
Yeah, I've been tracking the impact of AI on AR closely. At my last firm, we had just started experimenting, simple applications like
Mm,
editing and formatting research responses for length and clarity. But even at that level, it was clear that AI could do more than save time. It could really shift how
mm,
you operate. One example that really brought it home for me is that I used ChatGPT to draft a full AR strategy framework for
mm,
an AI customer service company. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but what I got, and it
right.
still required a lot of effort and time on my behalf to complete it and hone it and get it really finely tuned. But it gave me a solid first draft in
Mm,
minutes. One
yeah.
that covered the narrative pillars, evaluation planning, engagements, etc. And that kind of acceleration is really game changing. And I
Mm,
think that AI really helps you sort of prep smarter and faster and scale your impact because scaling an AI program is always one of the toughest
yeah.
things to do, especially when it's often a mighty team of one or you're working with limited resources. And I think
Right.
there's many areas where it can help, but five areas that come to mind for me where AI can make a real difference is first on evaluation support. Databricks has
Mm,
really done some interesting work. They're building an internal AI tool that helps you to generate ROI responses, and that's a huge lift.
mm,
The AR team and all the teams that they collaborate with, so they can really focus on sort of influence rather than on a lot of the administrative aspects of that.
mm,
Of course, in content creation, using AI as
yeah.
your digital teammate to generate, update, and maintain a lot of that analyst-facing content, from internal, messaging, and making sure that it's always in the company's voice. And then third would be engagement preparation, really summarizing prior research, surfacing analyst sentiment trends, and flagging language shifts over time. So that you're going into all these analyst engagements, informed. Um, Fourth would be competitive intelligence, really sort of synthesizing public and private those confidential conversations that you have with analysts to identify positioning gaps and market white space, and then especially follow up too. That's one of the key things to really take your program to the next level is the follow up after an engagement. So
Right.
it's capturing the meeting notes and the analyst
Yeah.
feedback, and then translating that into action items, putting those on the calendar. So, and
Mm,
then really what AI can do that's been super helpful for me is just a sounding board that's always available. Especially like when you're at a team like Salesforce, where you've got people with that huge amount of experience, they are great sounding
right.
boards, but sometimes they're busy, sometimes they're unavailable. Or if you're at a smaller company, you're a team of one, uh, that sounding board can be really helpful. Even just
Yeah.
asking prompts such as, what have I missed? How can I make this stronger? Is really
Yeah.
helpful. So the opportunity is not just to sort of move faster and be more productive, but it's about working smarter. And it's not a tool, or I'm sorry, it is a tool and it's not a replacement. So human
Right.
judgment is still the key here, and the relationship building, and
Mm.
that will remain the core.
Yeah, I mean that that makes sense. I know, as we start to incorporate more of it in our daily work, I found. I mean, here's a simple example: the podcast prep. It used to take 2 or 3 hours to put together questions. Right now, I have one of my AI tools draft the questions, and I spend 10 minutes editing, and I'm done. And that's 2 hours gained in productivity that I can use for something else that I definitely need. So I can see lots of little, tools that help me do things better. Meeting notes, meeting prep. I I get a lot of those like, I must have made this meeting 3 months ago, and now I don't know what I was going to talk about. But I have an agent that runs and tells me, "This is what you guys talked about before. Here's their LinkedIn profile. Here's what you said you were going to talk about in this meeting." Talk about life saving there. It makes such a difference rather than stumbling around in your inbox trying to find that last email and understand what you were doing, right? So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
I,
in
I
full.
could-
Oh, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in full disclosure, ChatGPT and Claude helped me in my preparation for this podcast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely they were on both sides then. That's good.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. So I want to shift gears just a minute because I'm curious about what you're seeing, and obviously I'll talk about what I think analysts are doing, what I'm doing with the tools, but from an AR perspective, how do you see firms incorporating AI into research methodologies, reports, writing, content, all those different things? I mean, what are analysts doing with it that you've observed?
I haven't seen dramatic changes in tone or the structure of reports just yet, but it's clear AI is starting to influence both what analysts write about and how they do
Mm,
their work. On the topic front, AI shows up now in pretty much every major report and evaluation. And we're seeing some
yeah,
early category shifts. For example, Gartner has introduced magic quadrants with AI specific framing, signaling a
right,
recognition of how AI is shaping software categories. Behind the scenes, AI is likely supporting analysts through transcription, summarization, and internal search
mm,
tools, letting them cover more ground faster. One particularly interesting use case is AI analysis of customer reviews on peer platforms,
yeah,
using LLMs to really extract that product sentiment at scale.
yeah,
And from an AR perspective, we need to keep up. If analysts are accelerating their workflows, we should too, whether through briefing prep, content generation, or pattern spotting. But again, speed alone isn't the win. The core value of AR
right.
remains that strategic influence through the relationships, trust, and thoughtful judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say from my perspective, the two biggest things, well, maybe three that have helped me so far that have had the biggest impact anyway. One is just having a better research tool, right? I use a series of these models for different things, but being able to assemble all of that research without having to spend a lot of time on Google going to link to link to link, it just saves you a lot of time. And you mentioned summarization. I have always thought, man, it'd be nice if I could summarize these briefing decks. And then, of course, when I realized I could with the new tools, I started doing that. Of course, then after a little while, I went, oh, wait, these are NDA. I better not do that way. So I run a local model to do the summarization, but it's still the same thing. And it's a great benefit to me to be able to go back and look at summaries rather than to have to go dig through a bunch of PowerPoints to try to find that one little data point that I'm trying to come up with for a report or something. So it just definitely saving me a ton of time. Even on the back end, you run a business, just having a tool that reconciles your finances on a regular basis rather than you having to go through, it makes a big difference in that administrative burden. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, it's automation of a lot of those really common workflows where
Mhm.
it's super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Well, so as we've talked about this tools, I mean, I think it's starting to what I'd say democratize certain amounts of access to information and analysts. So, do you think the industry analysts? Do you think this gatekeeper role that AR plays on them is that changing? I mean, how are analysts adapting their value proposition in this world of democratized access to AI and agentic AI and generative AI?
Well, AI is definitely changing how enterprise buyers access information.
Mhm.
As we were discussing, LLMs, ChatGPT, and those tools can really summarize research, compare vendors, synthesize the peer reviews, and obviously that is shifting how the buying journey sort of starts and sort of
Mhm.
challenging the role of analysts and analyst relations as gatekeepers. But I think the
Mhm.
key point here is that access to all that information isn't necessarily the same as insight, because some of
Right.
the most valuable analyst input comes from private conversations. They can give you customer feedback, talk about potential like implementation or sort of pricing challenges, nuanced perceptions. Those things don't get published and they're not
Right.
accessible to those large language models. And that's why the relationships matters and why
Right.
AR remains essential to unlocking that value. Analysts themselves, I think, are adapting at different speeds.
Yeah.
Looking back 18 months ago, I remember conversations with some analysts who called the scale and the speed of AI disruption early, and they were absolutely right. And I think
Yeah.
leading analysts now are pushing past that hype and demanding clarity, which they have always done, and I think is actually super clarifying in this
Mm.
environment of a lot of hype around AI, focusing on the real use cases, the customer impact, and the
Mm.
business value. And in a world, that's flooded with content and hype, the differentiator isn't the data or the latest marketing pitch, it's the trust. And that still comes from judgment, context, and conversations for both
Yeah.
analysts and analyst relations.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to watch this, and I'm I agree with you. There was a period of time 2 years ago or so, and I started really working on this right after ChatGPT came out, and you know I thought, wow, this is going to have a big impact once I played around with some of the tools, and in fact, that's why I started this podcast was to try to help people understand what we were doing. And this is, by the way, this is the 91st episode, so we're getting close to 100. Um, and I think that it has already shown itself to be, a huge disruptor and offer a lot of opportunity for transformation in a lot of different areas in businesses. And it's no different for analysts or analyst relations, I think.
Exactly. The speed has just been mind blowing. I just follow the news flow every day, and I'm continually impressed.
Yeah, I do that. I do a weekly newsletter, and it is a struggle to keep up with everything. And weekly, I mean, if I had the time, you could do a daily newsletter, and it would still be hard to keep up because so much stuff is happening so quickly. Uh, Goodness. Well, so I'm curious too about from an operational standpoint because I'm obviously a lot of what the analyst relations folks coordinate in helping maintain this relationship are these analyst briefings on a regular basis and handling inquiries, people inside of your organization that want to talk to analysts about specific things, that sort of thing. So, is AI having an impact on those parts of the AR business?
Oh, most definitely. AR is significantly improving both preparation and follow up
Mm.
for, I think, analysts and AR teams. On our side, anything repeatable, like updating analyst profiles, summarizing
Mm.
prior interactions, tailoring messages can and should be streamlined.
Mm.
And that creates more space for personalization and sharper storytelling, and even actually reaching out
Right.
to more analysts, which is always a
Mm.
conundrum for analyst teams. There's more people you'd like to talk to, but you're obviously limited in your bandwidth. And I think analysts will use AI in a similar way, reviewing transcripts, as you were talking, analyzing past briefings, and surfacing
Mm.
relevant content faster.
Yeah.
This could make their questions probably more targeted. They will bring up that what you said in that briefing last year that was directly relevant. But it'll make their
Mhm.
feedback more actionable.
Yeah.
But what AI can also do is help AR teams, sort of step back and take a look at that sort of proverbial bigger picture, making sure that each interaction has a clear next step and it connects to
Mm.
the overall AR strategy, supporting the team goals and the metrics. Again, it's not just about
Mm.
speeding up the work, it's making the work more connected. And then that's the human element in this new paradigm, we want to use that word paradigm,
Right.
is only growing in importance. And as the touch points become more automated, the value of those real time conversations, especially in person interactions, will stand out even more. AI can overall enhance the process, but the relationships still really drive the influence.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that part is extremely important, I've written a lot about human in the loop, human on the loop, human oversight, those kinds of things. But in this case, we until the day that you replace me with a bot and you with a bot, we have to worry about the relationship, right? And relationships are human driven things. And obviously if it's important, then that's something that we need to continue to build on. And the AR could help using the AI, but you're not gonna that's you still gotta work the individual, right? So Yeah, that makes sense to me from an analyst perspective. That's how I think of it. I want that relationship because that's where the value is in in that bi-directional conversation. Really.
Yeah, it's underlining the relations in, the analyst relations moniker.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I always liked analyst relations better than influencer relations too. I was always a little iffy on whether they meant I was the influencer or they were trying to influence me. So
Ah,
well, words are tools. Um, anyway, so what? Speaking of tools, what kind of platforms are what kind of tools are AR teams using? I mean, obviously, I would assume they're using some of the public models, but there must be some specialty tools out there too. So, how are you using these tools, and what works, what doesn't?
yeah, it's a mixture of both. And I think tools like ChatGPT really work across the entire AR stack, from
Mhm.
drafting strategy documents to refining messaging or doing due diligence. Again, it's like having that digital teammate there, great for gut checks, Q&A brainstorming, and increasing productivity across the board. One of the more innovative examples that I referenced earlier is Databricks Aria, which is their
Mm,
internal AI agent that they built specifically to help draft RFI responses for evaluation. That's
mm,
really a glimpse of what AR teams can do
mm,
to start building their own tools. But you don't need to go to that level or start at that point right away. You can get real
mm,
value by tapping into AR features that are already available in tools like AR Insights Architect, or experimenting with LLMs like
mm,
Claude or Gemini.
mm,
Again, the focus is on sort of those common repeatable workflows, anything that requires speed, structure,
mm,
synthesis. But what hasn't lived up to the
mm,
hype is, the expectations that, snap of the fingers and, you know, boom, they'll magically produce, AI will magically produce, strategic content, or, these relationship derived insights, right out of the box. That still requires human judgment. And you're not going to have a digital AR agent yet. You may in the future.
mm,
But I think what's really holding back sort of broader adoption isn't the technology; it's the mindset. And some AR professionals are
mm,
skeptical, some are overwhelmed, naturally so, just with all the hype, and
yeah.
others just maybe haven't had time to explore. But the tools are here, and I don't think there's not a need to overthink it. But start
Mm,
small, iterate, and stay curious, because the
yeah.
the upside is really huge.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's how when I work with clients that are looking at AI strategy or how do we get into agentic AI, particularly lately, that's the hot topic. It is start small, try it, have success, build on the success, and I think that's true at any use case that I've seen. Work through all of those different issues and bring your team along so they understand their role. And maybe someday my analyst bot will talk to your AR bot, and you and I go play golf or something. But until then, right now, obviously it's a that relationship really matters, and I think proving out your use case and establishing how and what, and then bringing the people along, that's important. It's as important now as it was when you were implementing ERP or CRM or anything, right?
Mhm. Yeah, sort of time tested.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. So let's put on let's get out the crystal ball for a little bit. So what do you what do you think looking ahead? I don't know. I mean, with AR, with AI, it could be looking ahead 3 weeks. But if we look ahead 3 to 5 years, which is a lot, I realize. How do you think AI is going to reshape the whole analyst landscape? I mean, do you need fewer AR people? Are their roles different? Do you need different skill sets? I mean, how does that impact? How do you think that plays out?
Well, I take a glass half full view on this. AI is definitely reshaping analyst relations, but not by reducing its importance. If anything, it's amplifying it. Because if you
Mm,
think about it, and you know this well, disruption always drives demand for
yeah,
analyst insight. And AI is unlike any tech shift that we've seen, and we've seen already quite a few.
right.
And an interesting anecdote is a lot of earlier stage companies these days are now jumping on or looking to initiate AR programs,
Right.
sort of to take advantage of this. And over the next 3 to 5 years, I think AR roles will actually expand, not shrink, because, AI will help automate a lot of these, repeatable workflows. Um, but it's going to help AR teams, improve efficiency. It's going to help them scale, and it's going to free more time for strategic work. Again,
Mm,
talking smarter, acting faster. But then, AR professionals can really focus on what moves the needle, and that's narrative strategy,
right.
cross-functional collaboration, the relationship building, the in-person engagement. And analyst firms themselves will evolve. Love to hear more thoughts from you on this, but like more data, faster cycles, more
Yeah.
scalable research delivery, self-serve as well, sort of bot to bot.
Mhm.
And AR teams need to sort of match that pace or risk being left behind. So and again, going back to that mindset, there is a new mindset
Mhm.
that's required, to be more innovative, more strategic, and fluent in AI as a teammate. But again, the core value doesn't change. It's all about earning the influence, and the best
Yeah.
AR pros will use AI to do that better and faster than before.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a balanced way to think about it, right? We know there is some disruption, but at the same time, we're in a relationship business, both sides of this, the analyst firms and the AR teams. So for now, at least, let's figure out ways that it makes us more productive. I mean, I do more research reports than I ever used to because I can research things faster. I do more blog posts than I used to because I can research things faster and put things together, or even just brainstorm ideas. Right? I mean, sometimes you're looking at a blank screen, going, "Okay, I really need to write another blog post this week about something, but what?" And just ask one of your assistants, and you get a list of potential topics, and something in there may resonate. Right? I mean, just those little things make a huge difference for now. I don't see a future where analysts get replaced or AR teams get replaced in the foreseeable future. I guess we all know that someday that's probably the case for a lot of things, right? But not probably in our lifetime, or at least mine. Um, cool. Yeah, that's good. I you know there's always sort of some tension between authentic relationship and then this influencer thing. And I talked about that just a minute ago, a little bit about the influencer versus, influence relations versus analyst relations, that sort of thing. But how do you think that AI either makes this more difficult or amplifies it? Maybe it does, amplify your ability to influence the influencer.
Yeah, again, as we've been talking, AI doesn't, remove that tension, but it does reshape it. And then, the core of that real relationship with an analyst is built on, mutual respect,
Mhm.
clarity, honest feedback, even criticism. Analysts, such as yourself, flags a gap in your story or questions, positioning. I think that's a sign of that, you care, enough to engage, and that's really great because that candid dialogue, especially, even the times when you disagree, that's where you sort of, you build up trust and you
Yeah.
build up that shared history there. The key is to keep it, fact based, never veer into the marketing speak, stay grounded in what analysts value, which is use cases and customer impact and business value. AI will really help us, scale, on the AR side, scale personalization and
Yeah.
track context, across
Mhm.
more analyst relationships, and that's a
Mhm.
good thing. But again, engagement can't be fully outsourced. If you
Right.
rely too heavily on automation, too many sort of templated follow-ups and generic content pushes, then you're
Mhm.
just going to replace influence with noise. AR teams will need to be more disciplined. Every communication should be intentional. Every plan should be regularly reviewed to emphasize and prioritize quality over quantity. And the
Yeah.
tools, these new AI tools will support you, but the influence still comes from,
Mhm.
again, that sort of trusted human.
Yeah. I mean, it it definitely, it's very tempting, but just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Um, it's producing a whole lot of something that's of low value versus a few things that are of high value. Still the way to go from an analyst AR perspective, in my book, anyway. So I think that makes sense, and it goes a long way to building trust in that relationship too. So, but, for AR professionals that are listening, they may be feeling anxious about AI. I mean, I know I talk to my analyst friends a lot too about it, and there are certainly some that are more anxious about this than others. But what advice do you have for them? I particularly around what skills should they be thinking about developing to stay relevant? And, as things change, obviously they want to keep those skills honed in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally understandable why people feel anxious about AI. It's this amount of change is unprecedented. It creates a lot of uncertainty. It's new. It's fast moving. There's this continual hype. But I'd encourage people to reframe it. Think of AI as another tool. One that can take friction out of your day to day work. These will be tasks you'll be glad to offload. I mean, I think about it like modern cars with sensors and cameras,
Hmm.
making parking and backing up easier, faster, and safer. I mean, do I miss having to crane my neck every time I'm backing up and hoping I don't hit something? No, not at all. So I think AI can do the same for AR. Pulling insights from the research, dropping follow ups, helping you, move faster with more confidence. My advice would be to sort of start by breaking your work into tasks and workflows.
Yeah.
Sort of just you would sit back, diagram it. Look for the tactical, repeatable pieces where AI can help. Of course, talk to your IT team about approved tools and privacy
Mhm.
and security guidelines, especially if you're thinking of using public models, because a lot of
Mhm.
the AR corporate data is private under NDA. But
Mhm.
experiment with the permitted tools,
Right.
whether it's an internal version, ChatGPT, Claude, other AI tools. Also, talk to your peers in comms and marketing. They're having these same conversations, they're thinking these same things through, and they're already likely experimenting with tools that you can leverage
Yeah.
today. And then ask other AR pros what they're trying. I found in this environment the AR community is super helpful, super friendly, super open, and we're having a lot of good conversations about AI in analyst relations overall. The key is to start. uh, and
Yeah.
lastly, I would just say that what's really helped me is going back again to my Salesforce days, is sort of this concept that Mark Benioff talks about frequently. It's the beginner's mind. I
Yeah.
saw it modeled by him and a lot of the other senior leaders there about just staying open to change. Be curious, be willing to adapt, and try and influence where things are headed. And this mindset has served me well through
Mhm.
a lot of these major shifts. And I think it'll really be helpful as analyst relations professionals think about AI in the terms of their work and their careers.
Yeah, I love the idea of the beginner's mind. I think that's absolutely a way to stay open to managing the change and how things have gone. You mentioned something here too that really resonates with me. I just wrote something about this a few weeks ago, what I'd call a process driven approach to agentic AI, right? The idea that I'm going to try to automate certain things, and some things eventually I'm going to automate to the point where I don't need a human to sit there and be involved necessarily. Maybe it's just oversight or QA or whatever. But the process, understanding your process, breaking that down, and then coming up with the use cases across all those incremental pieces, I think that's really important. And as we look at it, you've got these general big AI agents that do a lot of things, and that's cool. But the places where I'm finding the most value are those really narrow ones. Like I have an AI agent that just takes meeting notes. I have another one that just prepares me for meetings. I have another that takes those transcripts and archives them and summarizes and makes it easier for me to find things. I mean, it's just the idea that I can break that workflow up into these small narrow tasks and have an agent deal with those, and I can trust that they're doing a good job of it because it's easy to verify each of those steps, right? I think that's the logical way for any company to approach, particularly around automation and agentic AI.
Yeah, I mean, just one example, I was thinking about sort of post event, analyst event workflows,
Mhm.
and just like the communications between analysts that went, that didn't,
Yeah.
pulling together all the insights from and the news from that have just been released at the event, pulling that all
Mhm.
together, getting feedback, planning follow up actions, all those workflows you can break down and see many opportunities for AI to help.
Yeah, that I think, I mean, to me, that's where we're moving quickly, and I think there's a ton of value in it. It's like that, the old Nike slogan, "Just do it," right? I mean, you got to get your hands in and try to understand how you can take advantage of this, and at the same time, understand the guardrails, understand places where there's risk. I mean, it's like the thing I mentioned with summarization of NDA briefing decks. Don't be stupid. Don't upload that to the public model. Use a private model that you're running locally. Then all those things are just us evolving and understanding the tools and how we can use them to improve our productivity.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, so Michael, I really appreciate you joining today. This is an interesting conversation and one that's obviously going to continue. But before I let you go, I always like to do this with a guest. Could you recommend somebody for the audience to follow? Thought leader, an author, somebody that you think would resonate with them in AI, or it could be just generally in management and business. But AI focused if you can.
Sure, I have a couple actually. The first one I would
Thanks.
recommend is Ethan Mollick. He's a Wharton professor.
Hmm.
He does a really great job breaking down how AI
Yeah.
actually works in the real world for business leaders, marketers, operators, anyone really trying to make sense of all this. I find his posts and what he writes about really practical and really help
Yeah.
cut through all this hype. Yeah, he's writing sort of like
Nice.
AI playbook for the rest of us, and you can check him out on Substack, and YouTube, and other platforms. And the second
Cool.
person from a different angle that I'd recommend is Martin Casado from Andreessen Horowitz. He brings a
Hmm.
highly technical and operator lens, but again, still makes it accessible. And he thinks about enterprise AI, the infrastructure, the
Yeah.
just the policy and sort of the practical implementation. And
Cool.
that's really helpful advice. And you can find him on the A16Z podcast and blog posts there. So, and you can
Yeah.
find me on LinkedIn.
Well, there we go. Yeah. No, I mean, great recommendations. And Ethan Mollick, I followed for a long time and really, really useful, really interesting. I'll have to check out Martin's. I haven't spent as much time with that community, I guess. And so I'll take a look because that sounds really interesting. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I really it was a great conversation and always good to catch up.
Okay. Thanks. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.